Listening to Dahlia's description of the operations of the Senate Judiciary Committee in recent years and seeing in the audience many folks who I lived with through the Clarence Thomas experience with, I can't help but think how different and better it was back in the old days. I do, before I get into my remarks, I want to first of all thank Doug for tremendous efforts that brought us to this point and all the work he's done over the years to lay the groundwork for the Constitutional Accountability Center and for the supporters and donors who've made this possible. I think it's fantastic that this organization is getting off the ground today, and just tremendous credit to Doug and the people who've been there and helped Doug. I also should just say I have a number of institutional affiliations, and I'm speaking here today only on my own behalf and not on behalf of any of those organizations, though none of them have quite so many syllables in their names as the Constitutional Accountability Center. But let me just make 3 quick points here, and I think we can get on to the conversation and the Q&A. The first is I feel like we are at a real turning point in the development of the constitutional debate in our country. A turning point where the right is on the verge of abandoning, or has abandoned, its flawed textual theory, its originalist theory, for just a much more crass, results-oriented jurisprudence. And it won't surprise any of you that I find Bush v. Gore to be the original sin in this regard. But I do think that Bush v. Gore represents a bit of a turning point. And Doug mentioned the movie Recount, which is playing on an endless loop on HBO right now, I think. But there's a great scene in the movie where Ted Olson comes to pitch Jim Baker on the idea of filing a lawsuit in federal court, raising an equal protection challenge to the hand recounts, and all the other Republican lawyers in the room look at him and say, this is just crazy. We can't file a federal lawsuit. We're states' rights people. We can't be raising these kinds of equal protection claims. They've never worked in court before. And Baker just smiles and laughs and says, well, I kind of like it. Maybe Scalia and Thomas will find their inner liberal this way. And I don't know if that ever happened or if that's merely movie makers' magic, but I do think that Bush v. Gore represents a starting point down the path to a results-oriented jurisprudence on the right. And I think the appointment of Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Alito are the pivot points on that. The fact that Justice Scalia apparently wasn't conservative or faithfully conservative enough to be Chief Justice, and someone who was even more kind of, I think, in my view, more direct and results-oriented took that job, I think shows that the right is moving away from a commitment to text and much more of a focus on results. And I think that creates a great opportunity for progressives to step in and to pick up the Constitution as our text and pick up a commitment to the text and history of the Constitution as a fundamental turning point here. I also think that, a lot of, Dahlia talked about the Roberts and Alito confirmation processes. A lot of it was a debate about umpiring, and I heard a lot of this kind of whole thing about their umpires. Is umpire the right metaphor? And a lot of debate about the umpire metaphor. In my view, part of constitutional accountability isn't so much debating the umpire metaphor, but like being the fan in the stands to say to Justice Roberts and Justice Alito, hey, what game are you watching? I don't mind so much that you want to be an umpire, but I don't think you're following the rules in an accountable way. I don't think this is the game that's being played here. So my first point is I do think there's an opportunity for progressives to step up and pick up the cause of textualism that conservatives are abandoning. Secondly, and here I will do a poor job of echoing Akhil's magnificent constitutional history, but I do think there is an important history lesson here about the progressive heritage of the Constitution, born, as Akhil says, in the echoes of a revolution, but also written along the way by great progressive leaders in the constitutional amending process. It was the radical Reconstructionists, not the conservatives who wrote the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. It was people like Bob La Follette and William Jennings Bryan, not Herbert Hoover and Calvin Coolidge, who were the inspiration of the 16th and 17th Amendments. And more close to our own times, we have constitutional text that was co-authored by Birch Bayh and Ted Kennedy in the 25th and 26th Amendment, not Newt Gingrich and Ronald Reagan. So, there are a lot of great progressive leaders who played a part in drafting and amending the Constitution, and we need to embrace that heritage as progressives and be proud of that heritage and own it. And, the last point I'd make about the launch of this organization and what it stands for is I've had the chance in my career to both draft constitutional briefs and campaign ads. And, seeing the range of argumentation in our society, I think we need a progressive theory of constitutional interpretation that can work in the classroom, in the courtroom, and on the campaign trail. And I think what's exciting about the idea of progressive textualism is that it is an opportunity to develop that argument that can have that kind of breadth of application and can answer some of the questions that Dahlia has raised. I will say, I have to say, in defense of Senator Obama here, I think some of the critique of his remarks is a little unfair, and I think that we have in Senator Obama a likely Democratic nominee who taught constitutional law at one of the nation's finer law schools, with all due respect to Yale, and has been acclaimed as by no less than Larry Tribe as one of his most brilliant students ever, and I think clearly has a great sense of the Constitution, a great vision for the Constitution, and I think would do a great job as president in terms of protecting and defending the Constitution. And I think if there's any failing here, it's less on the part of Senator Obama or even our friends on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and more that those of us in the progressive movement haven't developed enough vocabulary, enough argumentation, enough theory that these leaders can apply in a public setting. And so, I think that before Ronald Reagan, there was a robust conservative legal movement that developed a lot of the arguments that were made in the 80s, and I think we need to do a better job on our side of creating tools in the arsenal. I'm proud to be part of ACS, which I think is a key part of that movement and has done a great job in that regard. And now I'm proud to be part of CIC, which I think is another step in that direction and helps develop and advance that cause. So, I think when you look at the Constitution's text and history, there are a lot of great opportunities here to take this to the next step. I think what Doug is getting started today does that, and I'm proud to be part of it and pleased to be here today.